Thanks for showing up on a Friday. The Friday crowds are getting a little bit smaller each week, but you're here. You notice? I don't think we're at 100 today. That's okay, you're here. And that's what matters. Here's the syllabus. Today is December 19th. Right? And we are on schedule. We're back on schedule. We're going to, we're still on socialization. We probably will still be on that for the rest of today. But the next topic will definitely be social interaction, chapter 5, either the latter part of today or on Monday. So in terms of reading, since the last exam, we covered chapters 2, 3, and 4 at this point, and you should be reading ahead for 5 for the next time. Okay? We have a lecture all of next week, and then our next exam is a week from Monday. So right now, I can tell you for sure it's going to be 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we'll see what else we get to. Okay? But I'll know more next week. Any questions about the schedule? All right. When we last spoke, we were discussing the game stage in Mead's model of child development. And we had already talked about significant others as one of the important agents of socialization. And then we got up to generalized others, and that's where we left off. Right? This is definitely one of the more complex concepts, at least so far. We know that people are influenced by their significant others, the people that have most access to them in terms of their socialization and their early child development. But let's now turn to what the influences are of the generalized other and what that means. Can somebody help us with that? What does the generalized other mean? Give you an extra 2 days to look it up. Yeah. That's a logical answer. He said it's anyone who's not our significant others. And in an absolute sense, you're on the right track. That's not the specific answer, but conceptually that makes sense. Yes? Okay, so what can a child learn from that's not a person, right? What are the influences that affect people that aren't directly coming from people, right? What do we learn about life that doesn't come directly from other people? So that's why I'm saying you're on the right track, right? I don't want my clicks to this. Shove it back. It's a person's internalized impression of societal norms and expectations. What the heck does that mean? It doesn't help a lot more, does it? It's not a person. It's not people like significant others are. It's the general set of expectations and norms that people learn, that they internalize, that they tuck away for another occasion. So, what's an example? Right? And you were like, when I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, we learned about Pearl Harbor. I wasn't there, I wasn't alive, but we learned about it historically. And it had some real significance. And when you're a child, you learn about it, you hear the words Pearl Harbor, D-Day, all this kind of stuff, and you kind of internalize it, but it doesn't mean anything to you at that time. I would imagine it would have been the same thing for your age group for 9/11, right? You weren't alive, you heard about it, you know it was a big deal, but when you were young, it didn't have a particular significance to you. And then when you got a little older, you heard a little bit more about it every year. They talk about it again. And now, you understand the significance, right? You kind of internalized it, and when the time came, it became an influence. Not like a person, but like a set of norms and norms and values. And that could apply to a lot of things. It could be violent movies. It could be somebody in your family who you heard things about, but it didn't make any sense to you at the time. Maybe some relative who came over for Thanksgiving every year. And people would, oh, there's Uncle Bob, right? And you thought Uncle Bob was the greatest because he'd give you a couple of dollars and he'd play, checkers with you and stuff. But when you saw people, oh, Uncle Bob, right? Uncle Bob had an alcoholism problem and you didn't understand what that meant, and they would whisper behind his back. But when you got older, all of a sudden, all that stuff that you heard and internalized became a source of social resistance. Right? Things that you internalize earlier in life that later become influences. Does that make sense? It's developed throughout one's life. Bless you. And you draw from it when trying to understand how you should behave in certain social situations. This is why we talk about social psychology. This is just as much a psychological concept as it is a sociological concept. But the point is that Mead believed that it wasn't until the game stage that this became an influence. That earlier on it was just a bunch of words and circumstances and situations, and now children should start drawing on that to understand how to behave and become functioning members of society. Any questions? Got that? Some things are more complex than others. This is one of the more complex, but hopefully you got it. Okay? All right. Let's see if we can but it is discussed in the chapter. All right. So, those are the three stages of Mead's model. What is the central focus of Mead's model? 2 words. No, 3 words. Yes. Regular social interaction. I cannot overemphasize how important Mead believed that was. And again, how can you develop it? Generalized other way. You said it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It's probably not a person. But you have to interact with people to understand the context of it, according to me. Right? It's kind of like the difference between online classes and in-person classes, right? I teach both. And I try to make them as equivalent as possible. But if you take an online classes, you know that the interaction makes a big difference. Hopefully, right? That's the objective. Right? It's nice that you can email me if you're in my online class and I can answer you. And then a lot of times I'll post recorded lectures, but hopefully if you can ask a question and you get an immediate answer and a follow-up, that would make a big difference. So the regular social interaction, according to me, was the critical issue. Before we get to Piaget's competing model, I wanted to sort of talk about Cooley's model. It's not a competing model, it's an alternative model. Cooley and Mead knew each other. They worked together. They were both symbolic interactions, they were both social psychologists, and Cooley came up with a very streamlined model of child development. He called it the looking glass self. And this really applies more to general socialization than it does necessarily to child development. Who'd like to tell us what this looking glass self means? Yes?
It's like what I would be doing.
Okay, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. Summarize it that way. Somebody else? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, reaction or feedback are very important in this. Yes? Anybody else? what is that term looking glass self or should you be thinking about? What is it, is the term itself symbolic of? You have an answer? What's it? Oh. Yes. Of child self-perception? Eventually, yeah. And when we get through the stages, yes. Yes. But what is that term looking glass self? What should you be thinking about? What visual should you be thinking? A mirror. Yeah. A mirror. You hold up a mirror and you see your image, right? You see your reflection. So that's usually what the picture should. I don't know if I put it on there or not. I think I have it later. So there are three very straightforward and simple steps to the looking glass self. One, person has an initial sense of self. You come out of high school with a 90 average. Let's just use that as a round number, right? You had a 90 average, you were an honor student, you did well in high school, and you're coming in as a freshman, right? Your initial sense of self is that you are a strong student, right? You're confident in your ability to do well here at you all. That's your initial sense of self. You've gotten that sense from your past experience. Second stage, or step. A person receives feedback in small group interaction. You have the sense that you're a strong student. You come to college and you get feedback in small groups. How did I just give you feedback? In a very small group, two of us, right? Each of us, I gave each of you individual feedback. How did I give you feedback? Yes? Well, that's true too. That's true too. But I gave you a standard too, right? So no one else saw it. I posted it, and you saw it, everyone saw it. You're all great, I was great. And that's feedback, right? And it's not just about getting it from me, but I imagine at this point, you take another exam already, you got some other feedback from other classes, it was too soon. Yeah, you probably got one exam back from every class, or a quiz, or something, writing something, or something like that, and you've gotten feedback. So now you're this 90 student, you're this honor student in high school, and you're taking 5 classes hypothetically, and each of us gives you individual feedback. Now, you've gotten feedback in small groups, even though it doesn't seem like a small group, but it's a small group. And that feedback that you're receiving revises or confirms your initial sense of self. You're a 90 student, you're confident in your ability to be successful here. You get 5 exams back or 5 grades back. It averages out to a 90. You go, see, I told you, I feel very validated. I feel confident that I'm going to be a strong student. Or, maybe not. But one way or the other, in this example, and again, this is just one of many examples. I don't know about this class, but I like to use it to relate to it. The feedback you receive may revise or revises your sense of self because of the feedback. Initial sense of self, feedback in small groups, revised sense of self. And for about a third of you, it confirmed, at least in this class, that you were a very good student. About a third, you go, close. And for about a third of you, go, it's not the same in the class. Right? Something a little different. But that's a valuable lesson, right? Especially early on in the semester. Or it could be about a lot of other things. Who can think of another example of how you've received feedback in small groups and it revised your initial sense of self in some other situation? Yeah. Okay, that's a great one, right? Right? Especially if you've been at a different, level of competition, and then you come to another one, college or whatever, and now you're competing against, people who also were very good in high school, And now yeah, that's a really good example. And you get much quicker feedback that way, right? Especially track and field. I've had a lot of conversations with the track coach here about, we always talk about this, and that's the one place where you get immediate feedback, right? You run the 100-yard dash, you win, and you know you're better than the other person on that day. And then if you lose, you know you're not as good as that person on that day. And it just, in less than 10 seconds, or about 10 seconds, you find out a lot of information. Yeah, that's a really good one. Anybody else think of something outside of that? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great one. That's a really good one, yeah. I can tell you some stories about that. Not about New Albany, but yeah, I think I told you, when I came out of graduate school, I was teaching, I worked at data analysis for the government. It's not a very interesting government story about that, where you find out maybe the first day that things aren't what you thought was going to be. Very good. All right, everybody clear about that, about the looking glass self? Okay. There's the mirror. I should have put that up in the first animation. So it's something like that, right? You get feedback in this example about your sense of self. Okay. Now we get to the competing model, John Piaget's model of child development. Who would like to tell us from the reading what the basis of Piaget's model is? We know that for me it was regular social interaction. What was the critical determinant? What was the critical central focus of Piaget's model? Yes. Cognitive development. Very good. And that is completely different. So cognitive development, the way that the brain is wired, cognition, cognitive development. So, if you remember back last time, I talked about the story of Jeannie, right? Jeannie missed milestones because she was unfortunately locked in that room for 13 years and wasn't socialized as many people are. And she never really could be re-socialized, and people like me would say, there you go. She didn't have regular social interaction. Piaget would say, well, it's just a coincidence. Just a coincidence. It had nothing to do with it, and if your brain was cognitively wired correctly, she could have been re-socialized, and given the results of what happened to her, she would have been that way anyway, because he would have believed that there was something cognitively deficient in her mind, in her brain, right? So two different ways of seeing the same thing. But Piaget has more stages. We'll go through the stages. And the first he calls the sensory motor stage. So it's not the preparatory stage, it's a similar age range. But this one has to do, again, sensory, more about cognitive development, more about brain function. And he calls it the sensory motor stage, somewhere between birth and 2 years old. And he says that if a child's brain is cognitively wired correctly, probably not the right term for it, but if it has the correct cognitive development, he will be able to identify that objects are permanent, or what he referred to as object permanence. Right? I may have a video. I usually have videos, and sometimes I take them down, and I should keep them somewhere, but I'll see if I can show it to you. So, if you're familiar with early child development, this is actually why they sometimes encourage parents to play peekaboo with children, right? Peekaboo, right, with the face. Because if a child gets hysterical when the parent or the person covers their face, and the child can't see them, that means that they don't yet have object permanence. They don't realize that something that was there before is always going to be there. Right? So I have a video. I hope it's still up. Okay. Everybody a minute. All right. Let's watch the video, and if you missed anything, I'll put it back up.
Time, but not with Grammarly. In a few clicks, Grammarly's generative AI drafts professional.
Yeah, be careful with that. Okay, so now that the object, this little toy, the white and red thing, has been established, right? The child now understands or is shown that this is an object in the real world. They're going to the woman's going to cover the object with two different, or she's going to show two different towels, and if the child picks up the first towel and it's not there, and they get hysterical, she gets hysterical, that means she doesn't have object permanence yet. But if she looks to the other towel, and her mind says, yeah, if it's not here, it's there, that means she's achieved object permanence. So let's see how she does. Now it's being introduced in this towel. She shouldn't do that. She should say no.
That's right. Okay,
Really
where is it?
All right, here we go.
Oh no! That's not where it is.
So now if she gets hysterical crying, that means she's not going to look any further, but she will.
There it is. You found it, good girl.
So this young child has demonstrated in Piaget's model that she understands she's developed object permanence somewhere between her birth and 2 years old. Everybody see that? How that works? Okay. That's all. Just like in each model, there's a very simple milestone, a very simple takeaway. Is there imitation in the other one? Can there be imitation? In this case, can there be object permanence? If there's more, great. That's all he really thought was necessary for normal child development so far. The second stage is what he referred to as the pre-operational stage, somewhere between 2 and 7 years old. And again, it's varies by child. The fact that that woman was interacting with the child in Piaget's model was irrelevant. It could have been anybody, it could have been a machine. However she could have been exposed to it was fine. It was the test of the cognition, not the interaction with the person, right? Me would have said it was important to Piaget, not really. Okay, so here children master language and use words to represent objects and images. So that's the takeaway. And no, the takeaway is, so they are able to do this, according to, they should be able to do this. And then Piaget said, if they can, the takeaway, the milestone, the stage is, can they get past being egocentric? Egocentric means you're only aware of what you see in front of you, right? So, go. So, what I have on the screen is the same thing here. But if I turn the screen around and said, okay, I'm going to give you 20 seconds to look at the screen. So that would be it, right? And then I turned it around. If you were still egocentric, once I turned this around, you wouldn't be aware of what you can't see anymore. You could only be aware of what you can see. The test is, can children get past that somewhere between 2 and 7 years old? So with this stage, children should no longer be egocentric, meaning only aware of what they can see in front of them. As a child, no more, see more than their own point of view. I should have a video for this as well. questions. This is not the simplest stuff we're going to cover all semester. So if you have questions, you should ask. Okay. So you have a few seconds, and I think you can see another video. So I'll just set it up for you. So what they do is, just in case you can't see it, but I think you can. So they do this test called the three mountain test. The three mountain test. You know those volcanoes that some kid always makes for the science fair in high school? And then they put the baking soda and the vinegar in and it goes, like that. You know that paper mache mountain that they make? Well, it's something like that. And they have the child sit on one side and the interviewer sits on the other. So the mountain is just literally what's blocking their view of the other side. So, and this is, you'll see it, but just in case you don't see it. So they'll put a couple little objects on one side. They're like a little toy tree and a little toy horse and a little toy truck or whatever. And they'll have the child describe what they see. And most of the time they can do that pretty well. And then they'll have the child switch to the other side, and on the other side they'll have a baseball, a little toy baseball, and a cat, or just different objects, right? And they'll say, what do you see? And the child will do a pretty good job of seeing what they see on the other side. Then they'll ask, do you remember what you saw when you were on the side where I am now? And if they can remember any of it, they're no longer egocentric. But if all they can do is focus on what they see at the moment, they haven't passed that stage yet. And I think I see it. It's called the three mountain test. I don't know why they say three mountains, but okay. There it is. This is the one they usually show. I don't know why they say it's like that.
See what you see when you look at that from where you're sitting? What are some of the things that you see? A cat.
And a tree and a ball.
Okay, now we're going to do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool? An owl. What is that?
A goat.
A goat. Okay, is there anything else you see?
He's doing fine when he's looking at the things that he can see directly. But now she's on the side where he was before with the other objects that he saw already, and now she's going to ask him, do you remember what you saw when you were on this side? And that's the test. It's not a big distance, but we'll see. He's young.
Okay, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And there's another little tree.
Another little tree. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that.
So he couldn't do it. And that's okay. He's young. But there's going to be another case here with a man who's a little bit older, but still in that range, will do a little different. But is there any questions about what's going on so far? Right? Just what's in front of you, cognitively, can you perceive anything outside of your field of view? Even if you've seen it before, right? Okay, let's see one other example. This one works a little differently.
Okay, so can you tell me what you see from that side?
A fox and a bone and a volcano and
Yeah.
a rock and a big fat Christmas tree.
Now, Braxton, can you tell me what I see from where I'm sitting?
A bird and a river and a volcano and a horsey and a rock and a tree.
Okay, so he was able to do it.
Study.
Did you see the difference? Okay. He's a little bit older. Maybe the first young man would have done better in a few months or a year or so, but that's the test. First case was still egocentric. Second case was no longer egocentric. At least according to that test. All right, that's the pre-operational stage. The next stage is the concrete operational stage. Now, unfortunately, I don't think I have well, I think they took this video down, but I'll describe it. So, obviously, these terms have some meaning. Somewhere between 7 and 11 years old. Here, Piaget believed that the normally cognitively developing mind, something like that, should be able to understand abstract ideas, meaning things that are not just black and white, that have some nuance to them. That children should understand logic. They should understand conservation. I'll explain all these things to you. And causality and inversibility. So what's abstract? You know, how was your day? When you're a little kid, you go, either it was good or bad, right? You have a good day at school, you have a bad day at school, right? Yeah, you okay? When you're in college, if your parents ask you how your day was, it's probably not always going to be good or bad, right? 2 classes went well, lunch was terrible, I had a fight with my roommates, sociology was great, right? Those kind of things. It's a lot of nuance to it. That's abstract thought, one example, right? Where things aren't always defined clearly. Logic. If I asked you how many of you understand what logic is, everybody would raise their hand, right? But who could explain it? Who could explain what logic is? You want to try? That's a net result of logic. That's something that you think logically you can solve problems. So you're on the right track, but it's sort of that you're synthesizing something instead of explaining. Yes?
Straightforward pattern of thinking where one state makes sense of the next.
You're also on the right track. Good. It's the only reasonable conclusion that you can come up with given the facts that you have. Not what you think it is, but what the facts before you are. The only reasonable conclusion that somebody can come up with based upon the facts before you, right? Not putting in your own ideas. So here's an example, and I always like this part of the course because I get to use something that I actually still remember I learned as an undergraduate here. Here, fact number 1. Aristotle was a man. Fact number 1. Aristotle was a man. Fact number 2. All men are immortal. Fact number 2. All men are mortal. Given fact number 1 and fact number 2, what's the only reasonable conclusion you come up with? What's the only logical conclusion you come up with? Yes? Aristotle is mortal, right? That's a logical conclusion. Because you might have you might disagree, you might do whatever you want to do, but given those 2 facts, that's the only logical conclusion you come up with. Is everybody clear about that? Right? That's logic. It's hard to do, by the way. We always want to insert our own, experiences and stuff, but if we stick with the facts, it'll be more logical. Conservation means, an example would be, if I take it's a big flower vase, but if I had a vertical 1-gallon flower vase where the water was vertical, and in front of you, I had a big fish tank that was horizontal, and in front of you, I poured the water, a gallon, from the vertical container into the horizontal container. At your age, you would all know it's still 1 gallon of water, right? Sorry. But a child would now think maybe it's something else because it's not up and down anymore, it's silent. Right? It's the ability to understand that things can be conserved even if their appearance may be somewhat different. Causality, inversibility. The pencil hit the floor because I knocked it over, right? I knocked it over and therefore it hit the floor. Causality, inversibility. Okay. All these things are ideas that Piaget believes should take place somewhere between 7 and 11 years old, more concrete ideas, etc. Then, and I believe we do have a video for this one, and this is the last stage. And if we do, I'm going to need about 1 or 2 volunteers. You don't have to get out of your seat, though. The formal operational stage, somewhere between 11 and 15, but getting closer to your age. In fact, if we have the video, it's going to be a guy who's closer to your age. I think he's 17. But anyway, in this stage, if the mind is working as it should, and cognitively developing as it should, Piaget believed that more highly abstract thought should be accomplished, and hypothetical ideas should be understood. Hypothetical means something you've never been asked to think about before or consider, right? Something that is not necessarily going to happen, but it's a question or a situation that you have to consider probably for the first time. So I'll give you an example, and then we'll hopefully see the video of how important hypothetical ideas are. The company that owns Google is called Alphabet, right? The story was, for many years, that during interviews for technical jobs at Alphabet, software engineers, all that kind of stuff, they would ask legitimate questions about the job, about your experience. But somewhere in the middle of the interview, they would ask this question: why are manhole covers round? You all know a manhole cover can cover the sewer hole. And they would, you're in there, you just graduate from RPI with an engineering degree, and now you really want to be a computer engineer, you work for Google, and get free lunch, and play ping pong for the day, and all that stuff. You heard about, right? And make good money. And I'm asking you all these questions, and you're answering all these questions about HTTP5 and all this, technical stuff. And all of a sudden, I stop and I ask you, why are manhole covers around? What do you do?
Physics class needs to explain why covers around or
No, you're out. You're not getting the job. What else would you do? Yes. What's that? Okay, that's an answer. Okay, that's an answer. But why aren't the holes, triangular? Okay, you gave an answer. You didn't just shrug your shoulders and say, "Can you ask me another question?" Or I wasn't prepared for that. Okay, you gave an answer. Yeah. How do you know that? Okay, he actually knows the answer. The actual answer is circles are the only shape that so the big heavy metal manhole cover can't fall back through the hole, or else it would hurt somebody. It'd be very difficult to retrieve and all kinds of stuff. Correct. Any other shape, if it was a triangle or a rectangle, it could turn and fall into the hole. Right? That's the answer. But they didn't really care. They wanted to see if people could handle hypothetical situations, to work through the problem, even if they didn't get the answer. Great for you, but you would have moved on to the next stage. But the people that would have just said, I don't know, they wanted to see, because at the job, they were pretty sure that everyone was going to be facing hypothetical situations of another kind, right? That's why that's so important, and it should take place there. So let me see about the video. I hope we do. Yeah, okay.
Leading scholarships, literally millions, which means for undergrads who receive thousands of dollars.
Okay, here we go. Now I need a volunteer. You don't have to leave your seat. You just have to answer a question. You want to? You already answered the question. Right? You're too smart. How about somebody else? I'll assume that you're going to know the answer. Yeah. Well, actually, you answer a lot of questions. How about you answer a lot of questions? How about somebody who hasn't gone? You answer a lot of questions. You answer some questions. I'll let you go. Go ahead. Are you ready? You want to volunteer? Okay. I need to ask you one set of questions. I'm going to ask you hypothetical. Okay? You have to answer right. First, and I normally don't ask you this, but for the purposes of this, how old are you? Okay, just so we know where you fall in this one. Okay? Here's the question. If you had a third eye, where would you put it? Fine, okay, you said you point. Okay, you answered right away, which is great. Let's see how you did.
Okay, and so how old are you?
17.
Pretty good.
Alright. If you had a third eye, where would you put it?
Probably in the back of my head.
Why?
So I can see behind me and in front of me at all times.
Okay.
Okay, don't feel bad. 99% of the students I've ever asked that question say beforehand. But you see the point. Okay, need another volunteer. Someone who doesn't go. You, okay. What would happen, let's make sure I do this right. What would happen if people stopped having children? What would be all people? Civilization would stop. And what are some of the things that would happen before that? I know, I'm putting you on the spot. That's kind of the point. Yeah. Assuming you're right. Okay, so to be an older population. Okay. Those are answers. Those are quick answers. Let's see how you did. Well, let's see how Enzo did, really. You were fine.
Allie. And Allie is
Oh,
taller
this
than
is
Joe. Who's
Okay. Anybody can answer this. Allie is taller than, Kelly is taller than Allie, and Allie's taller than Joe. Who's the tallest? Yeah, this is perfect. Anybody can answer the question. All right, I'll let you do it. Okay, got it, right. This is a logical progression, by the way, right? This is exactly what logic is. These are the facts before you. Given those facts, what's the only reasonable logical conclusion you come up with? So there's something in all the things from the stage.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay, so now we're going to get to your question.
What would happen if people stopped having children?
Oh my god. Then the human evolution will come to an end.
Okay, what are some things that would happen before that?
People are gonna be unhappy. I don't know. I don't know. I guess people would be like having sex with condoms. I don't know.
So Enzo's struggling. So you're all on the right track. That's the bottom of it. Okay, so that's the formal operational stage. So you saw examples of more highly abstract questions, still depending on his ability to think logically, and then asked hypothetical questions, which you now know on an interview, no matter what it is, don't say, I don't know. Try to work through it, right? It's good to be honest, but it's also good to show that if you're faced on a job with a hypothetical situation, you'll be able to think through it. Any questions about Piaget's model? Okay, we have 10 minutes back in. All right, so we got through Mead stage, we got through Piaget stage, we talked a little bit about Cooley's, working by itself. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about socialization. Because we have been talking about socialization the whole time, but we took a little, we looked at early child development, but if you remember the first sentence, somebody dropped something over there. Yeah. The first sentence in the definition that I gave you of socialization was what? What were the first couple of words? How long is the process? Yeah. Lifelong process. So let's now, rewire our brains for a moment and remember that we're not just talking about up until 15 years old or something, right? What we have been talking about, for the most part, has been primary socialization. From birth to early childhood. That's the first part of it. I always smile when I see infancy. Not in this class, but in another class that I teach, I talked about how a study of something was in its infancy. And I put it up on the screen and all this stuff. And then on the exam, the subsequent exam, I said, what stage is this study in? And it was like infancy, middle, late stage. And no kidding, I had 4 students call me over and say, what does this word mean? I said, which word? And they pointed to his infancy. So, in case it's not clear, infancy is the first couple of years of someone's life, the first year or 2 of someone's life, right? When they're an infant. And I know you probably don't need to know that, but I had enough students ask me that question that I want to make sure that there's no question about it. Okay, so from infancy to early childhood. Then comes secondary socialization, and that's what you're in right now. And that we're all in right now. This is from early childhood through the rest of your life. And if you're a freshman, or even if you're not, but if you're a freshman, this is the beginning of a new stage, right? And again, we're now in week 4, so it's barely a month that you're away from the norms that you were used to for your full life. And just out of curiosity, assuming that you're here, this is the 4th week of your, or the end of the 4th week of your new stage of your socialization. What's different? What's the biggest difference that you're experiencing from back home or from high school or something? Yeah. Okay. But okay, 7 things are new. Okay. And how's that working? Okay. Anyone else? Yes. You can't do what? You can't go to your room you're very comfortable. Okay. But you knew that was coming, right? This is different. All right. Yeah. Yeah. High school is, they'll let you keep going until you get it done. Right here, it's, you get a couple chances, but not too many. Right? Yeah. The pressure's a little bit, right? And there's money involved. Yeah. Yes.
You don't have as many friends as you did in high school?
Okay. That'll probably work itself out, but sure, for now, yeah, it's probably true. Anybody else? Any big changes? Yeah. 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 Okay. How's that working? Don't adjust. Okay. Well, that's what, that's really what this is all about, right? I will say this, and again, 2 seconds of my own opinion. The comparisons are probably not fair because it's been so long, but when you come up here as a freshman without cell phones and without FaceTime and all those things, it really was like you were leaving home. I don't know, I see people on FaceTime walking around, talking to their parents or their brothers, sisters, friends, like they never left home. Right? And I don't know if that applies to any of you. And it's great, and I probably would have done the same thing, but it's probably not allowing people to get socialized as much as they would have. Right? But then again, it's wonderful on the other, right? Okay. We talked a little bit about agents of socialization. We got 5 minutes. To tell your parents, I am not going to, no, I'm just kidding. Do whatever you want. Although I got a feeling it's probably the other way around, right? They're probably FaceTiming you more than you're. Okay. Agents of socialization are individuals, groups, or social contexts. Right? So we know that not always individuals, it can be groups, it's not always groups, it sometimes can be other forces, generalized other things like that, we'll talk about that now, within which socialization takes place. Agents of socialization, influences on us that facilitate the socialization process. So we talked about some of them, but we'll go through the list. A couple minutes we have remaining. And live again. This is almost directly from the textbook. So let's go back to this. So the details here are very important, right? You, that's you, in case you didn't notice. And the family is, the color and the thickness of the lines are obviously intentionally different. Because your family, and you can also associate that with agents, with significant others, most of the time, not everybody, but most of the time, are the earliest and most influential agents of socialization that we have. Then over time, right, so age, as you get older, we'll go over these, mass media, school, peers, and other, and work, eventually, work. Okay, and then eventually work. Okay, so the family, sorry about that. As I mentioned, main agent of socialization early in life and early childhood still remains influential, but over time becomes less influential as peers start becoming more influential. Okay? Then as people get older, they start going to school. As children get older, they start going to school. And I gave it away already, but one of the stages early in the school, in the schooling process, is daycare. And not a lot of scholarship and research has been done about that early ages of socialization, that early stage of school. Daycare can start as young as 6 weeks, right? Parents and mothers who want to go back to work after maternity leave can, in theory, drop off children for daycare at 6 weeks, and then all the way through to kindergarten. So this is a particularly important stage, and it's not been studied a lot, but this book, Nurture Shock, did study daycare. Oh, all right, we're almost done. Okay, we'll pick up from Nurture Shock. Please make sure you read chapters 4 and 5.